Hello, welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. Even before Thursday's state funeral, Koreans continued to flood the funeral hall of Seoul National University Hospital to pay their respects to the late Kim Youngsam, Korea's first civilian president who ended decades of military dictatorship in the nation. South Korea holds a special ceremony to mark November 23, 2010, the day North Korea launched its deadliest attack on the South's territory since the end of Korean War. In Belgium, police carry out raids to capture the Paris attack suspects who fled to Brussels, but Salah Abdeslam is still at large. Meanwhile, France is sending an aircraft carrier loaded with fighters to execute airstrikes on ISIS targets in Syria. We start with the passing of one of the most respected pro-democracy figures in Korea, former President Kim Youngsam. He led the country from 1983 to 1998 and died in the hospital in the early hours Sunday morning. We now connect to our Shin at Seoul National University Hospital for details. Semin.
Good evening, Daniel. Yes, it's the second day since the late President Kim Youngsam has passed, and a string of mourners are coming in to pay their respect, and it's not stopping. So far, accumulated 8,500, have come to pay their respects here at this hospital. And since this afternoon, that number has expanded, at times creating lines of mourners. Now, President Park Geun-hye also came to offer her condolences to the late President Kim after returning from a busy week and a half of overseas diplomacy trip early this morning. Former and current political figures have also visited in rows, including Lee Chang, who served as prime minister during part of Kim Youngsam's presidency. And U.S. Ambassador to Korea, Mark Lippert, and renowned business figures, including LG Chairman Koo Bo-moo and Samsung Electronics Vice Chair Lee Jae-young, also came by.
Certainly, he has earned the respect of many of those who are in attendance. On Thursday, the late president will be honored again through a state funeral, I believe. Semin, tell us about the significance of this gesture.
That's right. The former president, and now the late president, will be given a state funeral. Now, that was decided by this cabinet meeting late Sunday afternoon. And in fact, Kim will be the first former president to be given a state funeral since the State Funeral Act was revised last year, November. Now, according to the revised law, such funerals are given to a former or incumbent president or anyone respected for having provided distinguished service to society. Now, unlike other funerals where the mourning period is 3 days, the period for a state funeral is 5 days. A national state funeral committee will also be set up for the funeral, headed by the Prime Minister Park Geun-hye. He'll organize everything from selecting the funeral parlor to supervising the burial ceremonies. And after that 5-day mourning period, Kim's funeral will be held at 2 p.m. on Thursday, and the funeral procession will depart from the front of the National Assembly. Kim will be laid to rest at Seoul National Cemetery in Dongjakgu District.
And Semin, I believe there will be public incense altars for those wanting to pay their own respects. Have they been set up yet?
Daniel, most have been set up, including the one in front of the National Assembly. Another major one here in the capital, Seoul, is at Seoul Plaza, and already the public have been paying tribute to the late president there. Now, there will be a number of public memorial altars set up around the country for people to pay their respects. And elsewhere in the overseas, altars have been set up in Korean embassies for those living abroad. And now, the Interior Ministry said memorial altars will also be set up in Kim Youngsam's hometown of Jeojedo Island, just off the southeastern tip of the peninsula. This has been Shin reporting live from Seoul National University Hospital.
All right, thank you for that, Semin. More than anything, the former late President Kim Youngsam will be remembered as a champion of democracy who ushered a shift away from decades of military rule in South Korea. Kwon Jang-ho brings us a reflection of the way he lived.
Kim Youngsam became the youngest member of the National Assembly in 1954 as a member of the ruling party of South Korea's first president, Youngsam. In 1979, Kim was expelled from the National Assembly for anti-government activities and criticizing Park Geun-hye, the father of current President Park Geun-hye. In the early 1980s, he was placed under house arrest on 2 separate occasions for a total of 2 years, which prompted him to stage a hunger strike. He served in the National Assembly again before winning the presidential election in 1992. The former president has been credited for his role in Korea's pro-democracy movement, where he laid the groundwork for a peaceful transfer of power after decades of military rule. He had his 2 predecessors, Chon Do-hwan and No Tae-woo, arrested on mutiny and treason charges for launching a crackdown against anti-government protesters. Kim pardoned them both at the end of his term. The former president was also praised for making the nation's financial system more transparent. He implemented a policy requiring people to use their real names when making financial transactions, as well as ordering high-level public officials to reveal their assets.
Without the real name financial transaction system, we cannot root out corruption in this country.
However, Kim's term in office wasn't free from criticism. Public sentiment dipped after he accepted a $58 billion bailout from the IMF in the aftermath of the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis. And in his last year in office, one of his sons was arrested on charges of bribery and tax evasion. Kim apologized for the scandal and later banished his son from public life. The former president is survived by his wife, 2 sons and 3 daughters. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
And during Kim Youngsam's term, Korea experienced rapid economic growth as well. It recorded an average annual growth rate in the 7% range, and it marked the first time the national income per person topped the $10,000 mark. For more, we turn to our Kim In-ji.
Former President Kim Youngsam has been credited for his contributions in lifting the Korean economy to a higher level through bold reforms during his term. Korea's economy grew rapidly at a pace not seen during any other administration. According to Statistics Korea and the Bank of Korea, the nation's economic growth rate stood at 6.8% during Kim's first year in office. By 1995, it reached almost 10%, with the country's national income per person topping $10,000 for the first time. In 1996, the growth had somewhat slowed, but was still over 7%. In the same year, Korea joined the OECD, which many say helped elevate Korea's status in the international community. But in 1997, a dark cloud was cast over the economy. A string of debt-ridden conglomerates collapsed, triggered by Hanbo Steel, a subsidiary of the 14th largest conglomerate at the time, Hanbo Group. The total debt of bankrupt companies in that year reached nearly $30 billion, and Kim was forced to accept a massive bailout from the IMF. Kim was later mocked as the IMF president and criticized for mismanaging the economy. Despite being criticized for failing to reform the conglomerate control system and for not doing enough to rescue the economy, it's true that he made the country's financial system more transparent through implementation of various policies such as a real name transaction financial system and making high-level public officials disclose their assets. Kim In-ji, Arirang News.
Turning our sights to a different story now, South Korea is marking a solemn anniversary on this Monday. 5 years ago to this day, North Korea unleashed an artillery attack on the South's border island of Yeonpyeong-do, killing 4 and injuring many more people. Kim Hyun-bin reports on the special ceremony held to commemorate that day.
On a quiet afternoon on November 23, 2010, North Korea launched its most deadly attack on South Korean territory since the end of the Korean War. Hundreds of artillery rounds bombarded the western border island of Yeonpyeong, killing 2 civilians, 2 Marines, and wounding many more. Hundreds of civilians were forced to evacuate. To commemorate that day, a ceremony was held on Monday at the War Memorial of Korea in the heart of Seoul. Hosted by the Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs, over 3,000 distinguished guests, including Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-hwan and Defense Minister Han Min-gu, attended. Hwang paid tribute to the fallen soldiers and emphasized the importance of bringing peace to the Korean peninsula.
All the provocations from Pyongyang in the past were painful lessons for us. From that experience, we should work to reach true peace on the peninsula. To do so, the most important thing is to overcome the 70-year-long separation between the 2 Koreas.
President Park Geun-hye, who had just returned from summits overseas, was unable to attend, but a pre-recorded commemorative video speech from her was shared, stressing the importance of being ready for any type of threat from the north.
앞으로도 우리 군은 완벽한 군사 대비 태세를 확립하여 어떤 위협과 도발에도 흔들림 없이 대처해 주기를 바랍니다.
South Korean military says if an incident like this happens again, it will immediately retaliate and destroy the origin of attack with more than 3 times the force used by the North. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, soon after that devastating incident, South Korean military announced that North Korea fired a total of 170 rounds of artillery on Yeonpyeong-do Island and the surrounding areas. But apparently some 400 shells were fired. In fact, though many were off their mark. Yi-soon explains why less than half made it across the border.
November 23, 2010 is a day many South Koreans will not forget. Around 2 in the afternoon, North Korea launched an attack on South Korean soil, the first since the 1953 armistice agreement. The North's shelling of Yeonpyeong Island, just below the northern limit line, the NLL, off the west coast, killed 4 South Koreans, including 2 soldiers, and injured 19. At the time, South Korean military announced that the North fired a total of 170 rounds of artillery, with 80 hitting the border island.
We judged that North Korea fired around 170 rounds. Around 90 fell into the sea and 80 landed on South Korean territory.
However, Seoul-based YTN TV reported this Sunday that the announcement could be wrong. It says that according to South Korea U.S. intelligence, the North actually fired 400 rounds. The network detailed that the North first fired 40 artillery rounds, then 40 minutes later fired an additional 360, 400 in total. But due to the North's poor artillery maintenance, only 170 of them are known to have made it across the NLL, 80 of them hitting the targeted area. 230 rounds out of the 400 either misfired or did not cross the NLL. Lee-Soo-in, Arirang News.
The South Korean Navy training group is visiting Manhattan for the first time. The trip marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence. Kwon So-hwa has this report.
The Gangnam-chan destroyer and the support ship Daecheong are on a 4-day visit to Manhattan with around 630 sailors, including some 140 cadets. While this is their second visit to New York, it's the first to the Manhattan port for the South Korean Navy's Cruise Training Task Group since the country's Navy was born 7 decades ago.
Traveling to various countries, experiencing their culture and sharing thoughts helps us in becoming global leaders.
The trip marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule. Departing last August, the group is visiting 15 countries in gratitude of their participation in the Korean War. The United States is their 13th port of call.
Through the visit to our #1 ally, we want to contribute in enhancing our bilateral relationship and strengthen our bond.
The sailors who showed off their talents during an on-board ceremony were warmly greeted by local officials and residents.
This is amazing. I've never seen anything like this before. They're all so talented.
I reaffirm the pride towards my country, and I hope for a firmer South Korea-US alliance.
While there, the crew will visit the New York Korean War Veterans Memorial and the United Nations headquarters. They depart for their next destination, Colombia, on Wednesday. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is back in Seoul after attending a string of multilateral summits in 3 different nations. Hwang Sung-hee, who was traveling with the president, has this wrap-up.
President Park is back in Korea after a 10-day tour that took her to Turkey, the Philippines, and Malaysia. First on our agenda was the annual summit of the Group of 20 Advanced and Emerging Economies in Antalya, Turkey, which was largely overshadowed by the terror attacks in Paris that left 129 people dead. In a rare departure from their usual focus on the global economy, the G20 leaders agreed to streamline the process of intelligence sharing, strengthen border controls, and crack down on terrorist financing. In Manila, Philippines, President Park attended the APEC summit, where 21 world leaders focused on ways to achieve inclusive growth. The South Korean president laid out policy prescriptions based on Korea's development experience, including human resources development and bolstering rural communities. At the ASEAN Plus 3 summit in the Malaysian capital of Kuala Lumpur, President Park pledged greater cooperation with Southeast Asian nations, noting the launch of the ASEAN community at the end of the year. She also sought the support of the international community in dealing with North Korea's nuclear ambitions at the East Asia Summit. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Belgium is on edge as local authorities take action to protect their citizens from possible terrorist action. They've rounded up a number of suspects, but Salah Abdeslam, a key fugitive from the Paris attacks, remains at large. Oh Soo-young has the details.
Over the last few days, Belgian police have carried out a total of 22 late-night raids, capturing 16 people with suspected links to the Paris terror attacks. However, they are still looking for the last surviving Paris attacker, Salah Abdeslam, who is on the run.
No firearms or explosives were found. Salah Abdeslam is not among the persons arrested during the searches.
The search for Europe's most wanted man has stretched from Paris to Brussels and now Germany. Belgian authorities said Abdeslam was last spotted Sunday evening near the city of Liège, heading towards Germany. Brussels continues to be on lockdown for the third straight day under a maximum terror alert. It's believed to be a base for many jihadist networks in the region. And authorities believe at least 2 people are planning imminent attacks in Brussels. While Europe is on high alert, France is gearing up to strike back. France's aircraft carrier the Charles de Gaulle is due to arrive in Syria on Monday, carrying 26 fighter jets which will be fully operational for airstrikes against the Islamic State. To rally a united coalition against the Islamic State group, French President François Hollande is meeting British Prime Minister David Cameron in Paris Monday, before heading to Washington and Moscow later this week for further defence talks. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
That's all for now. Thanks for watching.